Hey everyone, welcome to 996 The Howl for the uninitiated. This is an unedited YouTube vlog discussing everything Arizona Coyotes and an unfortunate, disappointing, and miserable end to the regular season depending on who you are. The Coyotes failed to meet expectations. If you're a regular NHL analyst, maybe you had them right where they finished 5th place in the West, battling for a playoff spot until the dying days of the regular season. But as a fan, you always want your team to make it to the playoffs. So let's look at the numbers, look at certain scenarios and see where it all crumbled down. Obviously, I'll take a look at player stats in part 2 of this season review. That should be more funner than this team stat review. So let's get into it. They finished 23 wins, 26 regulation losses, and 6 overtime shootout losses. They peaked 4 games above 500 around April 6th. They were 19, 15, and 5, and that seems like a really long time ago, and I'll get into that date later, but that was their peak of this season, because right after that they went on a 5-game losing streak, and that was kind of the end of this season. Their points percentage way down compared to last season. They finished with 0.473. Last season they finished at 0.529, and last season, if the season didn't end prematurely, that still wouldn't even be good enough for the playoffs last season. So obviously much lower than last season and still not good enough for the playoffs. Their goals for, surprisingly, even without Taylor Hall, the Coyotes managed to score at about the same pace and even more than last season. They were scoring 2.73 goals per game. Last season, they were scoring 2.71 goals per game. That was a good stat to see the team, really galvanize themselves without an elite scorer like Taylor Hall. A lot of, breakthrough seasons by a lot of young players for the Coyotes. And it was up to them to really carry this team offensively and lead this team. And I'm happy that some of the young guys they're up to that task. And they did carry the Coyotes in terms of goal scoring. Obviously, still not enough. Still need some help in the offseason. But good that they managed to do it without Taylor Hall. Their goals against, probably their worst stat of the season next to save percentage. It was above 3, which is really bad. It was actually up more than half a goal per game compared to last season. They were allowing 3.16 goals per game, way up compared to last season where it was at 2.61 goals per game. Obviously, you're facing a lot of good teams a lot of times. You're facing Vegas, Colorado, and Minnesota about 8 times in this season each. So that's probably why the number was so high this season, but still, Rick Tocchet, his system, the reason why he was a good coach in previous seasons was because he's good defensively. He relies a bit too much on goaltending, but he gets a lot out of goaltending. His PK is usually good, but this season, the save percentage numbers were down, penalty kill was down, and goals against was down. And obviously Rick Tocchet's not known for a high up-tempo offensive type style of hockey, so just nothing was in his favor this season, and it's probably why it led to his departure. I think at least if his bread and butter, systems, areas of his hockey game were good, maybe he'd get an extension, but his bread and butter on the defensive side of the game wasn't good at all. And, there's not really much you can hype about Rick Tocchet this season. So, moving on, their power play was the best it's been under Rick Tocchet. It was 20.45%, up from last season where it was at 19.16%. I always harped on the power play. I couldn't believe their power play was 3rd in the division, that it was above 20%. It seemed like the power play let the Coyotes down so many times, but apparently it was good. So you can't really argue with that. Maybe most of those power play goals were against bad teams like Anaheim and San Jose. Even St. Louis had a bad penalty kill percentage. So maybe they took advantage of some struggling penalty killing teams. I still would stand by that their power play did let them down, and numerous times there were so many games where they could have used a good power play goal to just get their momentum back, or to have an insurance marker and shut the game away instead of letting the other teams come back and win the game. I just felt that a lot this season, so surprised that the power play was doing so well. Their penalty kill was down. Usually the Coyotes are top 5 in the league in penalty kill, but they're 5th in their division at 80.61%. It was down almost 2% from last season. The penalty kill struggled hard. Even in March and April, it was down to like 78%. Down the stretch, it got better, but too little too late. And the penalty killing unit didn't seem that good compared to last season. They missed Dromerson for a couple of games, I think about 10 games. Ekman Larsson missed 10 games. Pitlick was injured down the stretch, missing about 10 games. Maybe the loss of Richardson, Grabner really killed, the momentum of the penalty kill. But I still like Krause, Fisher, Pitlick, Dvorak, and Larson on that penalty killing unit. I just think when you're facing Vegas, Colorado, and Minnesota 8 times in a season each, it's hard to keep that penalty kill number up, and they have amazing power plays. So you're under siege a lot. Their discipline, the Coyotes' discipline this season was pretty bad too. A lot of too many men penalties and just taking way too many penalties compared to previous seasons, I felt, and really putting that penalty kill to test. And unfortunately, it wasn't up to task. Their penalty kill unit was. Their save percentage was way down and really miserable. I mean, looking at last season's save percentage numbers at 0.919, like that is elite. Obviously, we saw Kemper's elite season last year, but Kemper even got injured in December last year. So that number is like half the season with Ronta and Aiden Hill. And just this season, even though Kemper got injured again, really bad save percentage numbers, bad goaltending. Kemper never looked himself this season, never looked himself at all. Maybe one shutout here or there where he looked in his prime form, but very pedestrian. Ronta was awful this season, nothing good from his game. Aiden Hill was good. I think Aiden Hill probably had the best goalie numbers for the Coyotes this season. I'll look at that in part 2 when we look at player stats. But I felt Aiden Hill was the best goalie. He played better than Kemper. The team felt comfortable with Hill in net. Fans felt comfortable with Hill in net. I just didn't feel comfortable with Kemper. I felt like something was off. He even said in his post-season comments that he wasn't 100% after his injury. And it was just in the last few games where he started to feel good about himself. So that probably was way evident in those 2 losses to the San Jose Sharks when they got eliminated from the playoffs. So yeah, the goaltending was really bad. We're not going to see Ronta next season, obviously. But I'm comfortable in a Kemper and Aiden Hill duo. Both of them were invited to the World Championship Canadian roster, so that's pretty interesting. Even Michael Bunting will be in the tryouts for that Canada team. So you got the World Championships and playoff hockey on the menu near the end of March. And finally, possession numbers. Their Corsi percentage was 48.5%, up from 48.3%. It wasn't last in the division, it was 5th. And they actually beat out St. Louis, Minnesota, and San Jose in terms of possession. I remember talking about Minnesota's bad possession numbers in previous videos. I believe they finished last in the division in terms of possession, but Minnesota, they don't need the puck for long. The moment they get a good opportunity, they'll shoot it, and it goes in more often than not. Really surprised by that stat, how Minnesota doesn't really cycle the puck in the opponent's zone. They score off the rush. If they do enter the zone with control, they'll just drive to the net and get a scoring opportunity right away. They're very lethal, very dangerous, and very efficient in terms of carrying the puck into the opposing zone. They don't throw it along the boards, pass it to the D-man, find a nice play that the Coyotes seem to do a lot of. The Coyotes didn't really have that hunger to carry that puck right to the home, to the crease, and passing way too much along the perimeter. And Rick Tocchet even said coming into this season that he wanted to improve the possession numbers for the Coyotes. And it started to look like that in the beginning, but I think it just got away from them and they just reverted back to Rick Tocchet hockey that we've seen all previous 4 seasons. So possession still poor for the Coyotes, and that has to do with the talent they have up front. Hopefully with a new coach, they could possess the puck more, be more lethal, have the mindset to just attack the net once they get the puck, instead of passing it along the wall, along the perimeter, and passing it back to your D-man. So when we look at the matchups, where did it all go wrong? Well, they went 2-5-1 against Vegas and Colorado. I kind of don't even expect better numbers than that against those teams. Those teams are primed to win the Cup. Actually getting, 2 wins against each of those teams was good. It could have been better, obviously. Some of those games were blowouts, not in the Coyotes' favor, so those games were hard to watch. But I feel like they really lost this season against Minnesota, going 1-7. 7 regulation losses against the Wild. Inexcusable and really disappointing. Minnesota wasn't even on the radar to really make the playoffs in the offseason. They had nothing going for them. They didn't really make any big trades in the offseason. They lost Dubnyk. They got Cam Talbot, who's been struggling in previous seasons with Edmonton, Calgary, and Philadelphia. No one expected for Talbot to have such a good season, or their aged rookie, their Connor Garland, if you will. I believe he's 25 years old, I think, played in the KHL, just came over to the NHL and lit up the league and will probably win the Calder. And he carried the team and energized the team. And, the team isn't mediocre anymore. The Minnesota Wild are an elite team, and you should be worried if you face them in the playoffs because they could turn it on. They're lethal, and they're a very good hockey team. Against St. Louis, the Coyotes went 5 wins, 2 losses, 1 overtime loss. We all remember they had that 7-game series in February, maybe near the end of January into February. But great matchup against St. Louis. They really dominated St. Louis even after losing the first game. Just felt they had St. Louis's number. They were confident against the Blues, and it shows in their record. Moving on, Los Angeles, they kind of lost the season against LA as well, going 3-4-1, and it was April 7th when I felt that was the defining moment in the Coyotes season. They were 19-15-5. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They had a 3-1 lead going into the third period against LA, and they lost that game 4-3 in regulation. That started a 5-game losing streak for the Coyotes, their second 5-game losing streak of the season, and it was just, like I said, a bottomless pit of despair during that time. That LA loss really hurt them. They didn't really gather their confidence after that. They went 3 wins in 15 games leading into their elimination from the playoffs, not counting the last 2 games against San Jose when they were eliminated already. But 3 wins in 15 games, really poor, really just their confidence was shot. They had no morale after that LA game. It just seemed like an uphill battle and a struggle to finish the season after that loss. San Jose and Anaheim, they had their number. Their only 2 regulation losses to San Jose were those 2 games when they were flirting with playoff elimination, where the San Jose Sharks just came out in the first period and the Coyotes dug themselves a hole way too large to crawl out of, and sort of lost their season there as well. Those 2 games against San Jose, everyone thought they would be gimme games. I think the team thought they would be too. Those 2 games, it's hard to believe those 2 games were the only regulation losses to San Jose, and they were the most important games against San Jose of the season. It's just typical Coyotes. When it matters, when it's all on the line, they don't show up, and it costs them this season. And then finally Anaheim, 6-1-1. They did their job. They only got Gibson once this season, where they threw everything at John Gibson, and Gibson managed to steal a game. Thankfully, they didn't face Gibson much. They faced a lot of Ryan Miller, and Stolars to finish the season. So they did their job against Anaheim, and that was pretty obvious that they would dominate Anaheim. On a month-to-month basis, they started January below 500, going 3-4-1. They had a good February, going 6-5-2. They had that St. Louis 7-game series in which they went 4-2-1. March was okay, 7-6-2. They had a 5-game losing streak in March, but still managed to get some wins. And then April, the wheels fell off, 6-9, 9 regulation losses in April. Really disappointing. And then in May, they finished 2-2-1. Obviously, with 2 back-to-back games to close out the season against San Jose, getting both of those wins. So, March and April were really hard months for the Coyotes. That LA game, April 7th, had a 3-1 lead going into the third period. Kind of lost their season for them. Going 3 wins in 15 games, also inexcusable. And hopefully the future's a bit brighter. There's a lot of hope going into this offseason. A new coach, a new jersey, new players, a lot of cap space. So hopefully the GM and Bill Armstrong isn't cash-strapped by the ownership. Hopefully he can go out and fill some holes and fix some problems for the Coyotes, revamp that defense, move away from those aging veterans and get some good young defensemen in there. And we'll see, the rookie seasons of Jans Yannick and Victor Soderstrom and maybe some other guys under the radar that will make the club out of training camp, but that's really far away. But this is the review for the season. It was bad. They didn't meet expectations. They didn't sell at the deadline, which would have been nice, all things considered. But hindsight is 2020, and Bill Armstrong felt they were in a good position at the trade deadline. They were above 500. I believe they were 19, 17, and 5. There was a chance for them to make the playoffs. The St. Louis Blues were on a bad skid. I believe they lost 6 straight. So, obviously he should have sold at the deadline, but there was still hope that they could have made the playoffs. So that's it for me. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, spread the word, and thank you for your support.